Hello, everyone. This is your friend Carol with Piedmont Trails, and we are streaming live from the attic this evening. You may be able to hear the fan. I have a little window fan going. It's a little warm in the attic up here in the high country today. So we've got to keep the air stirring up here in the attic. We've got a little fan running, so you may be able to hear that a little bit in the background. If you do, I apologize. Tonight's topic is going to be about the North Carolina regulator migration routes during the summer of 1771. And this is kind of a where we left off from last month. We discussed during a live stream about the North Carolina regulators and their purpose and some of the events that were going on and it happened leading up to the Battle of Alamance. Well, tonight we're going to discuss what happened afterwards. And many of these families or men who were associated with the North Carolina Regulator movement left North Carolina completely. And many of these people never returned. This is one of the primary reasons why so many families who can date their ancestry back to the 18th century find out that their families arrived in North Carolina for even a short period of time. And this is a primary reason why. And why they left, even though they stayed only a brief time, migrating down the Great Wagon Road or the Trading Path or the Carolina Road or whichever road they used to arrive in North Carolina, they left not necessarily using the same migration routes. They went to different areas and different destinations, but they left their imprint on North Carolina and their records still survive. So it's extraordinary to find out more about these people and how they lived their lives and what happened to them, those that were involved with the regulator movement. So that's what tonight's main topic is about. We over the past month, we've shared several articles and podcast shows and videos about this topic. And if you are brand new to us tonight and just joining us, and you're not aware of these articles or videos or podcast shows that we put out, I encourage you to browse through our YouTube channel or visit us at PiedmontTrails.com to view the articles and references that we've shared about this topic so that you may learn more about maybe your ancestor as they were involved with this movement. We also needed to conduct a more thorough investigation on this topic because it leads into one of our projects that we're currently working on. Yeah, we work on more than just one or two projects here at Piedmont Trails. And one of those projects is the Mecklenburg Declaration of 1775. And we needed to do additional research work in this time period with the North Carolina regulators in order to lead up to and completely understand what was going on in the Piedmont area during this time frame that led up to 1775. So that's one of the main reasons why we got into this. And we decided once we did, and we made so many new discoveries about things that happened with General Hugh Waddell's company en route to the Battle of Alamance, which he did not make. He did not make it there. And then we found a lot more participants and their names and their families, and we learned what happened to them, where they lived, and then what happened to them after the Battle of Alamance. We started adding to our family files here at the attic. So that prompted us to share more with you guys on it. And that's the main thing while we're on here tonight is to share the information. Okay, I'm going to periodically I'll look up and read your comments. So say hi to me. Let me know you're here. Introduce yourselves to each other. Make new friends tonight. Bring a friend and join the live stream. As we stated, all of our live streams or everyone is welcome to attend. You can bring anyone you like. You don't have to be a subscriber to Piedmont Trails to join our live streams. Everyone's welcome to join in. Let me see if I left out anything before I read y'all's comments. I will periodically stop and read them, and then I'll answer the questions to the best of my ability. I may not always get them right, but I will answer them to the best of my ability. Melissa's here. Hello. And Elaine, Ellie, hello, you guys. How are you this evening? Melissa's here from Texas. Yes. We got Cassandra here from Indiana. Paula's here. Hello. Paula's here from Tennessee. Welcome. Scott's here from Northwest Washington, USA. Hello. Welcome. Patricia and is also here from Tennessee. Welcome, you guys. Welcome. I will share some resources, and I will share information about the maps that I'll encourage you all to use after you hear what I have to share with you this evening, so that you can learn more about these migration routes and how they appeared during that time frame. Scott says, haven't made a live show in several months. Well, Scott, we're glad that you made it tonight. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Okay. So we're going to travel back to 1771, and we're going to revisit the days right after the Battle of Alamance, which occurred May 16th, 1771. And we're also going to talk about the hanging of James Few, which happened the following day, which would have been May 17th. Governor Tryon stated at that time that all regulators would receive a pardon if they took an oath of allegiance to the crown. So over 6,500 men would do this over the next 3 weeks. So 6,500 men would take the oath of allegiance to the crown over the next 3 weeks after the Battle of Alamance. For those who refused, 2 militia groups marched throughout the Piedmont region to capture these men as prisoners and place them on trial in Hillsborough. If the regulators were not captured, then their homes, their property, their personal possessions were seized, confiscated, auctioned to the highest bidder at a later date. And there is documentation. You can get a huge amount of information through county court records and land deeds for this information. One militia group was led by Governor Tryon up until his departure to New York. As you all may know, Governor Tryon left North Carolina. He was offered a position as Royal Governor of New York, and that's where he was at the time when the American Revolutionary War was beginning to take place. So he left immediately, almost as soon after the Battle of Alamance had occurred, just a few months later. One militia group was led by him, and the other was led by General Waddell. Okay, and Waddell is the one who is primarily noted to travel through the heart of the Piedmont region and created the most chaos and havoc among the North Carolina Regulators, farmers, their lands, their crops. He is the one known for creating the most devastation. Both groups, however, captured over 100 prisoners. And these men were shackled with chains and were often seen with family members marching or walking along with them on their way to Hillsborough for their trial. The Moravians remark about this in their diary. The Moravians even offered information about suspected North Carolina regulators in their area in present-day Forsyth County. There were also other groups that participated in the capture of these men. And oftentimes the family, the wives, the children would accompany these marches and would travel with their husband to Hillsborough, marching, as they were shackled and chains. So I wanted you guys to picture that because that's the way it happened. All right, so after our research on this topic, we've noted before that many historians seem to portray the regulators as a small number of participants. But I think over the past month, we've proven the opposite here. Many people were involved with the North Carolina Regulator movement, and it's time to bring this information into the light of day so that their stories may be heard and preserved for the future. Excuse me, I am suffering from allergies, so I've got a little tickle in my throat tonight. Tryon and Waddell burned farms. They destroyed crops. They seized livestock. They used livestock for their personal use as well. They stole personal possessions and property such as land. Now, there's a confusion going on between those men who took the oath and those who didn't. And the paperwork was not always accurate. A man could have taken the oath of allegiance, and he could have been devastated when he arrived home to find his home burned or his crops destroyed. And he's standing there amazed at the look that he is having to look at and say, I took the oath of allegiance to the crown, and yet here I am, and my crops are destroyed. My family's home is burned. I have nothing left. Because that happened often. It created chaos and confusion. And, you know, think about this. 6,500 men took the oath of allegiance during those first 3 weeks after the Battle of Alamance. So how would you feel if you took the oath of allegiance, said you're sorry, okay, I should have never done this or done that or whatever, and you backtracked and you said, okay, I'll take the allegiance and I'll be faithful to the crown. And you return home and you have nothing left. How would that make you feel? Would that make you want to pick up your pieces and what you had left of your family and leave? Or would you stay? Okay. So it was a chaotic time. And the lack of paperwork, up to date of the files, and knowing who took the oath and who didn't just created catastrophe, terrible conditions. There are many cases where regulators, often took the oath and returned home only to face devastation and despair. It was their lowest point. They arrived in North Carolina to follow a dream, to possibly lift themselves up to a higher colonial status. In colonial period, status meant everything. So here they are, they're trying to do the very best that they can. They leave Pennsylvania, they leave New Jersey, Delaware, wherever in the middle colonies that they came from. They traveled that tough trip down the Great Wagon Road to reach North Carolina. They try to obtain land, which the land titles are a mess. Sometimes it takes 12 to 22 years to receive a clear title to your land. But they're still hanging on and they're still trying. They're trying to get their voices to be heard in the courts. They're paying their taxes, but it's not being recorded by the local sheriffs because they're keeping half the money for themselves. This is well documented. So, and here they are again. Now they've lost the Battle of Alamance. They've lost friends. They've lost neighbors. And many were killed. There were several killed. An unknown number, okay. There's documentation that proves that there was a strong amount that were killed at the site. Many wounded. And the Moravians can attest to that also in their diary, and I'll get to that in a minute. But, I just want y'all to feel how they must have felt. It was the loss of it was a bad dream. Maybe they should have never went to North Carolina. Just as the Regulators united on the battlefield that day, they also united during the days that followed. And many of them camped along the edges of the Yadkin River. There was a known campsite in Wilkes County, just before you get to Mulberry Fields area, which would be modern-day Wilkesboro, where it was noted that many families camped there after losing everything. They were making preparations to leave North Carolina, and they were avoiding capture. Another campsite appears to be along the New River area near the Virginia and North Carolina border. Now, some men left right after the battle, and they returned months later to pick up the pieces or meet their families and then take them elsewhere. Others, like Herman Husband, left the day of the battle, and he never returned. He left the day of the battle, and he never returned to North Carolina. Men like this would send word to their families, either by a messenger or by letter correspondence. They would get word back to their family members where they have settled, and for their family members to make the preparations and meet them there. That happened a lot. To fully comprehend the amount of acreage that was seized during the months of May, June, July of 1771, it's remarkable. And I urge you all to research the county court records and note the number of families that were truly affected. The number will speak volumes for the truth. It will. Okay. Beverly's here from Indiana. Hello, Beverly. Patricia, I used to know a person named Steve Waddell. I wonder if he was related. Never know. He could have been. He could have been, Patricia. Were portrayed by, Patricia asked a good question. Is it true that sometimes the people who took oaths were portrayed by the families of the ones who didn't take the oath? Yes. That is true. And Melissa says, my family lived on the Virginia-North Carolina border along New River and Grassy Creek. Well, Melissa, you're going to have to stay tuned because one of those migration routes goes right through that area, through Grassy Creek. Let's see. And 25 Mountain Fan says, my ancestor Thomas Wellborn in Randolph County was a regulator, and he is mentioned in the North Carolina Colonial Records. Good. Excellent. Okay, different routes were used, and it actually depended on the situation and the destination. Some of these families didn't have a clue what they were doing or where they were going to go or what they were going to do. So it takes time to prepare for a trip, just as they had prepared to come to North Carolina years before. Sometimes it would take months. Now these families are scrambling because if they're going to make a move, they're going to have to do it within the next few months. They need to do it before winter sets in, get wherever they're going to be settled. And so in time for spring planting for the following year. That's their goal. That's their number one goal right now. And so then they have to figure out where are they going to go. So you can kind of imagine these little campsites now, the ones that lost their homes, how they are grouping together in small campsites along river and major waterways. And they're making their plans together. And they're deciding together what they're going to do. So different routes were used depending on the situation and the destination. Men traveling by horseback or on foot alone could easily disappear, very easily, by heading west, and then either head north or south. They could use major hunting trails along the Blue Ridge Mountains. There were numerous hunting trails in 1771. Especially along the New River, through that area, or through Watauga River in that area, going to Catawba River on that side, heading a little bit further south. All of these major waterways offered various smaller creeks and streams that could supply nourishment for anyone traveling in the area, especially single men on horseback or on foot. So if there was a man that knew he was going to be, a price was going to be placed on his head, or they were going to be looking for him, then he may be thinking, I need to go now. And he'd take off on his horse or by foot, and he would take off on a hunting trail. He could easily hide out and get lost in the wilderness, headed west, at least for a little while. Excuse me. For these men, few knew their whereabouts until much later. So if you're tracing someone like that, you're going to have a gap. You're not going to be able to find them. And it could be for a year. It could be for a couple of years. And you may not be able to find a thing on them. You can't find them anywhere. They're not here. They're not there. Their family is still in North Carolina, but this man is not here. And you may run across that. But there's not going to be any documentation unless someone notes it in a journal or a diary that they're, and they're living in that particular area, or by clergymen that may note, oh, they had such and such staying with them, this man, and he may describe him. But other than that, there's going to be very few clues that are going to offer you information about where they are. There's a reason for that. They're hiding out. They're waiting. They're waiting before they make their decision or return to get their families. So you may have a gap there in your research. These men also avoided settlements, and most of the time they avoided families that lived in that area for fear of being turned over to Waddell or Tryon. Herman Husband left the battlefield heading west, and he stopped just outside of Bethabara, one of the Moravian settlements in present-day Forsyth County. He sent a messenger into the Bethabara and requested that a doctor should travel to the battle site and attend to the wounded. Now, the Moravians knew. Somehow they knew. They noted it in their diaries, and they recognized this man as Herman Husband. He's the Quaker Herman Husband, leader. And they noted that. Now, Herman Husband did not go straight north. When he left the battlefield, he went due west. That would have been Bethabara. He's heading west. So husband traveled further west until he reached the Great Wagon Road, which would have been on the other side of present-day Pilot Mountain. And once he reached that, then he traveled it until he reached his family in Maryland. And he avoided people, but at times he couldn't help it. So he had traveled under an alias name. There's documentation to prove that. So your ancestor may have done this as well. As for the families and other men who left North Carolina, almost all of them headed west first. For most, it would have been Tennessee would have been their new home. There are 2 wagon roads that are available to them from the Piedmont area during this particular time period. Great Wagon Road and another road that traveled to present-day Morganton, later to the Nolichucky River. The latter was a mere trail along the Limble River and the Yellow Mountain area, but this route would become a wagon road in 1771. And why is that? It's because of all of the natural traffic that is now flooding this route. It is now all of a sudden became a popular route to head into Tennessee. It was also the most western route. It was the furthest western route that you could take at that time. And I'm sure families felt safe from Waddell and his group being that far into the western sections of the colony at that time. A few years later, men would travel this same route to fight at the Battle of Kings Mountain. And once they crossed the mountains, the families settled, and many contributed to the Watauga Association in 1771 and the state of Franklin in 1784. It's funny how sometimes when we do research, I did a thorough investigation into the Watauga Association and the state of Franklin, I think a couple of years ago now, and really dug in deep for those records because I really wanted to know what was the start of the state of Franklin and why didn't they succeed and why were people so against them? Why did North Carolina just give up portions of Tennessee only that after Congress made them take it back for a length of time? It's just mind-boggling. And now you can see how all of these pieces of the puzzle fit together and how it all now connects, and portions of it connect to the North Carolina Regulator movement. Okay? Large groups seem to travel the Great Wagon Road into Virginia, and it appears that many groups divided once they reached into Virginia, with some wagons heading north and the remainder spreading out into Virginia. Many of them traveling to the New River, Grassy Creek area, heading over to Long Island, into Bristol. And then once they reach out Long Island, that would be a jumping off place to where they could go to other portions and sections into Tennessee. And many of them headed even further west from there. Other families would depart from Mulberry Fields in Wilkes County, present-day Wilkesboro, and they would settle along the New River in present-day Ashe County. And evidence shows a wagon road in September of 1771 traveling from east to west direction in this particular area, present-day Ashe County. And I remember doing a live stream topic about this, about the Baptist in that area, and how an overwhelming amount of Baptist population came to this particular area in the New River area right after, during the year 1771 and shortly thereafter. They even created the Strawberry Association during this time frame because it was such an overwhelming amount of Baptist churches that were beginning in this area. Okay. Where did I leave off at? Okay, so we're confident that the area, the little wagon road in Ashe County, was also a natural road made by the traveling families who were following the hunting trails made by Boone and others, the Linvilles, the Morgan Bryans, made, by all the ones of the hunting parties who would travel west to hunt. And I think one of these hunting trails became a natural road in that area, used by the regulators later. For those who traveled west and then south, they took the Catawba trading route, which was west of the main Traders Path. You heard me guys talk about the Traders Path. From there, they would aim for the Savannah River into Georgia. Most of them would cross right there at Augusta or a little bit north of it. Um, try Fort Charlotte, in between Fort Charlotte and Augusta. But they would travel through the Catawba Nation into Georgia, and they would settle near, and some of them would even settle in South Carolina near the 96th district. The population surrounding the 96th district after 1771 blows up is humongous. All these people, they are on the move. They are leaving North Carolina. Okay, Melissa. So, Melissa, I'm gonna get to the road in Grassy Creek in just a second. I'm just remembering where I left off on your comments. Any McCurdy's out there? Okay, Annette's looking for some McCurdy's if you guys know of any. And Mark Mottsinger. Hello, my friend Mark. How are you doing this evening? Oh, we're going to get into your ancestor lane. And I'm going to mention Buffalo Ridge Baptist Church. Yes, sir, I will. I'm going to do that later on this evening. When he left North Carolina. Oh, I've got some news for you. Okay, stay tuned. Stay tuned, Mark. Okay, Annette, and then Patricia. Cades Cove Records. Very good, Patricia, for sharing that with Mark. And Melissa, my people were Baptists. Yes, ma'am. Ellie, almost all branches of my family served in the Revolutionary War, either Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee. What's the best way to find out if any were regulators? On the last live stream, I shared some really good books. That there was one book in particular that was named Farming Dissenters. Let me type it in for you, Ellie. Is the name of that book. And I think it was written by Carol Watson, but don't quote me on that because I may be wrong. But in that book, she listed over 500 names of regulators. You're very welcome, my friend. And also, if you'll study the petitions, which I'm going to get into too, and also here in the attic, we've collected over 2,600 names of proven, documented North Carolina regulators who were active, very active with the movement. And we are still learning. We're still learning who all of these people were. If you have 6,500 men taking the oath of allegiance, this isn't a minority anymore. This is a major movement going on in North Carolina. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we went through, for those who traveled west and then south, and they entered into Georgia. A great many families did this. And we also talked about the 96th district. Let me say this. I have really been digging deep into this for, I will say, 90 days, outside of being caught up with making maps with the Great Wagon Road Project. I have yet to find one man or one family traveling east from the Piedmont region that was associated or connected with the North Carolina Regulator movement. Not one. Now, you guys may have. If you have, I would love to know. But I have yet to find anyone that actually left North Carolina and was involved with the North Carolina Regulator movement and traveled east. Okay. And I also want to stress that these people avoided the popular routes. They did. They did not take the popular routes. Herman Husband often questioned, why did he take the Great Wagon Road? And there were many, many people along the way that noted it and recognized him. He was spotted. And there were troops along the way too. I mean, don't just think that Virginia was not involved after they had gotten word from the Battle of Alamance. Everybody, the whole countryside was lit up. Everybody knew what happened, just as they did with the Boston Massacre, back in 1770 in March. News like that spread like wildfire. So I often question, why did Herman Husband take the Great Wagon Road all the way? Most of these families did not take the popular routes. They didn't take the Trader's Path. They didn't take the Carolina Road. They didn't. They didn't take the trading route leading down into Charleston heading east. They didn't. They didn't go to the east and get on a sailing ship and sail north or south. No. They didn't want to be recognized. They wanted to take the least popular routes. And many of these people often changed their names, especially single men. Especially single men. Herman Husband was noted for using an alias as he traveled. All right, I'm going to give you more of a description about the roads, and then I'm going to give you details about how you can find maps to show you these routes, okay? So if you were traveling west on the first route, heading into the area of Nolichucky River, okay, near Irwin, Tennessee, that's getting closer to Buffalo Ridge Baptist Church area, which was Spurgeon, which they later moved it to Gray's Station years later. But if you travel south from Fort Creek, you pass Oliphant's Mill, north of just a little bit near Statesville, North Carolina, okay? Then you would follow along the Catawba River until you reached a little area that was known as Quaker Meadows, okay? From Quaker Meadows, you would rest a couple of days, and then you would be in for your final trip, which would be the hardest, and you would turn north, and you would head towards Yellow Mountain and the Nolichucky River. Now, using today's routes, for this same route, you'd be in Statesville, you travel to Hudson, North Carolina, which is north of present-day Morganton. You would follow this westwardly and look slightly north to Spruce Pine. You would go on into Lost Cove and into Irwin, and then you would be there at the Nolichucky River. For people that were wanting to travel the route going into the New River area and then heading over in the Holston Valley area, Holston River Valley, you take the Great Wagon Road crossing into the Virginia line. You come to the road, the old road, which was known as Long Island Road. It was also known as New River Road. The roads did not have names, but most people remarked about it as that's the road that will take you to New River. They would take the road to the New River. They would follow the New River along to Grassy Creek. They would keep going through Grassy Creek until Taylor's Valley, and then they would travel on to Long Island at Bristol. Long Island was a jumping off place where they could recruit guides that would guide them the rest of the way into Tennessee safely. It was a jumping off place. For those that were traveling south, they would most likely, and there are ferry records, they would go to Biggar's Ferry. Biggar's Ferry along Catawba River, a little bit southwest of Charlotte. And they would, once they got on that ferry, they were in Catawba Nation. Okay. The Catawba Nation at that time owned 144,000 acres. They would travel through the Catawba Nation. Lots of people were weary of doing this because they felt that it was not safe, or, you never knew what would happen. But that was with any route, basically. But the Catawba's tribe was very friendly for the most part. They have, and there is still a section of the Catawba Nation there today that is part of those original lands right there in South Carolina. But they would travel through this area, and then they would keep going in a southwesterly direction until they reached north of Augusta. Most of the families didn't cross into Augusta, but they would travel north from that and then cross into Georgia from that way. So that's how they would get into Georgia. If they settled in South Carolina, they would be in the western sections of South Carolina. I will say that some families headed north. Okay, there were families that we have found that headed north, and primarily they did this to join other family members that they had living in that area, such as Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. For many of these, we later find these same families who lived temporarily went back to their area where their families were living. But we find some of these same family members who later moved, and they are settling into the Ohio River Valley, portions of Kentucky, or they're settling in western sections of Pennsylvania. And Yeah, we Harmon Husband is another prime example of that because he did settle in Western Pennsylvania eventually. Um, so we do find that as well. A large portion of these families, a large portion, never returned to North Carolina. And even though their stay may have been brief here in North Carolina, they left their imprint on the future of the colony and the future of a new nation. I want to repeat that. They left their imprint on the future of the colony of North Carolina, but they also left their imprint on the future of a new nation. And I wholeheartedly believe that. Make no mistake about it. If you really get into the research, you'll see what I'm talking about when I say that. All right, now to view these routes online through old maps, okay, I suggest that you look up the following maps. First one is dated 1775. 1775 by Robert Sayer. I'm going to write his name. Robert Sayer. 1775 map. Look that up online. There are several different websites where you can see this map. One of them primarily is on the Library of Congress, where you can zoom it in, you can really investigate it and look at it to your heart's content. Now, contributors for this map is also John Bennett and Henry Mosen. Henry Mosen is one of my favorites in North Carolina as far as surveyors, but Robert Sayers also. Okay, the next one is dated 1779. Is a South Carolina map. It goes into detail about the Catawba Nation and their lands and how their boundaries were set up and where the Catawba trading route actually traveled. And that map was created by Thomas Kitchen. That's Thomas Kitchen, 1779. And the last map is a pamphlet of maps that was created by Thomas Jeffries in 1768. Thomas Jeffries, 1768. So we got Thomas Kitchen, 1779, and that's the way you spell his name. Thomas. Well, if I can get the keyboard to work for me. And this by Thomas Jeffries is a booklet. Okay. It has more than one map in there. All right. If you suspect your ancestors were part of the North Carolina Regulator movement, I encourage you to research in depth the county court records where they lived. And also research the Hillsborough court records for the year 1771. The land deeds are also critical, and consider the petitions made by the regulators. Study the petitions. Look at the names on the petitions. A lot of these are available online. So do that. And this will also, if you study those petitions, it will give you a better understanding of exactly what they were asking for and what was really going on. And also, I want to mention Buffalo Ridge Baptist Church. I could do a whole segment on this church. I really could. But the history of this church in Tennessee, it connects to so many North Carolina regulators. It's phenomenal how many of the North Carolina regulators passed through the area, lived there temporarily. Some of them died there. Some just stayed there for a little while and then they left and went to other places. But it's phenomenal on how many actually went through this particular area, which was Spurgeon. It would be Spurgeon, Tennessee. It was a large group of traveling families, and they arrived in the autumn of 1771 in this area. By spring of 1772, they had their first church building constructed there. 1772, not 1779. I saw this today, but it was 1772. The original cemetery is intact today. If there is ever a cemetery to visit, and you're really into this, and you discover your ancestor may have been part of the North Carolina Regulator movement, and they moved to Tennessee, I urge you to visit this cemetery. I really do. It speaks volumes. Once you just see it, it just speaks volumes. The church was later moved to Grace Station, but I encourage you to research deeper into this particular area. Hint, hint. This particular area, Grace Station, what is it, about 12 miles southwest of Spurgeon, Tennessee, something like that. This particular area, not far from the Nolichucky River, in this area, a lot of North Carolina regulators settled, many of them. I may have an article coming up out on this. We'll see. We'll see how my schedule goes, because I don't want people to underestimate this group of people that settled in this area and created Buffalo Ridge Baptist Church, and their stories, because their stories are so fascinating, and what they endured and what they overcame, and then what they had to overcome in the days ahead of them. Um, it's just remarkable. So yeah, I may do something on that later. We'll see how that goes. And also, the original church site was an interesting note, but the original church site for Buffalo Ridge Baptist Church was less than 5 miles from the cabin of William Bean. Does that ring a bell for all you Tennessee historians? Okay. Um, I'm sorry, well, Scott, you just never know what you might find out when you start digging into this North Carolina regulator movement, and how many you just may find your ancestor after all. I wish you good luck on that. Um, Beatty's Ford along the Catawba River. Yes, ma'am. That would be not too far from the Irish settlement, just a little bit north of Statesville there. And they left North Carolina in 1820. Yeah, there were a lot. I was reading your comment there, Cassandra. Cassandra, a lot of people left in 1820, um, heading west. That was the first push of a westward movement. And Patricia, you mentioned the Nolichucky River. Rogers' name, that one was called, oh, Nolichucky Jack Rogers, yes. Yes, many people did use nicknames. And, guys, keep that in mind, because I want to say this right way. It depends on there. All right, let me say this. Let me say this. The North Carolina regulators were technically two groups when they started growing in size. Let me back up. There were small little bitty groups that organized in homes and cabins and barns and mills and taverns and everywhere all throughout the Piedmont region. Eventually, these farmers came together and made larger groups. Well, towards the days before the riot that occurred in Hillsborough, where they went into the courthouse and they attacked Edmund Fanning, drug him outside and beat him, and all of this, and then before Herman husband was removed from the assembly, was no longer able to attend. Before those days, there were two groups of North Carolina regulators, two sets of groups. One group was on the side of legal. They wanted to do everything legally, and they wanted to do it peacefully, but they wanted their words to be heard. They wanted to be heard. And when Governor Tryon refused to bring together the assembly for months, what was it, 18 months? He refused for the assembly to come together, knowing that some of these North Carolina regulators had been elected to the assembly and they were going to have their voice. And he would just have petition after petition just tabled and wouldn't bring the assembly together. So you can feel the frustration, but there was one group that still wanted to continue in a peaceful, legal manner. But towards the end, prior to the Battle of Alamance, we had a second group of North Carolina regulators, okay? They were all for the same thing, but this other group was more about violence. They were tired of waiting. They were already impatient. They felt like they were not gaining any ground. They weren't getting ahead. And so they felt like their days of being peaceful and going through this in a legal manner were over. and that they weren't going to accomplish anything unless they reacted with violence. So when you're researching into this, just kind of keep that in mind. It changed and it evolved over time. And, I really do believe that Herman Husband realized, hey, I've gotten way in over my head and I have no idea what to do now except run. And I'm not saying that, I'm not labeling him or anything. We may have very well done this very same thing. I think his heart was in the right place and trying to do the best, of what he could and bring people together. But in the end, with the battle and with him being with Quaker roots and then seeing all this violence and killing and wounding of his friends and neighbors, people he knew. And he also knew people who were on the other side who were firing shots at him. They knew one another. So I think it was just the end of the line, and he had nowhere else to go. I think a lot of families felt this during this time. And so they only knew one way, and that was just to leave, make a fresh start. There was no way they was going to ever have a respectable name any longer. If they were affiliated with the North Carolina Regulators, they were not going to be able to live. Now, with that being said, there were some who remained. A lot of them did remain in North Carolina, and they prospered, and they continued to stay. Now, this is where the historians will get into it, saying, well, they were loyalists. They were loyalists during the American Revolutionary War. There were some that were. When they gave their oath to allegiance to the crown, they meant it, and they were in no way going to jeopardize that. Even with the onset of the American Revolutionary War, there were some there that did that. But there were also just as many, if not more, that were patriots who fought during the American Revolutionary War. So historians need to get that right. And they weren't just a minority of farmers with pitchforks saying, I want my voice to be heard. They weren't that. They were strong-willed men who got together in an organized manner and specifically wrote out petitions and had signatures on it to get the word out and let their voices be heard. So we do that same thing today, do we not? Okay. All right, so I'm done with that. So, and then Tricia says, yeah, okay, I did that one. Next month, we may go to a different topic, and I'll tell you why. I have had a lot of requests about concerning Virginia families during the 1730 decade. I don't know why, but I have. So, we may switch up with that in May. And we'll go back to Virginia during the 1730 decade, and then we'll discuss some families and how they got there and what happened to them and all that good stuff. So, and records and how to do genealogy research during that decade. So we may do that. We have made some additional discoveries with the Mecklenburg Declaration concerning a United States English ambassador during the 1840 decade, and we'll see where that leads us. But right now it's becoming very interesting. So we'll have some updates on that come in May too. And then we'll get back maybe to the Mecklenburg Declaration for our live streams, or we may do that as an oracle or something. Okay, so we'll see what happens for next month. And the next live stream will be on May the 26th at 7:30 Eastern. That's May the 26th, 7:30 Eastern. Thank you guys so much for joining me this evening. I sometimes when we research the past, I get very excited, especially if I feel that a certain particular group or a family may enter my mind, and I feel like they were wronged and that their story hasn't been heard. I will get passionate about it. Sometimes I'll let that come through. So if I did that too much tonight, I apologize. All right. Thank you guys again so much for joining me this evening. Enjoy your journey to the past, and may God bless.